Everybody to this webinar today. We're going to be looking at why your children can be so triggering for you, and more importantly, what you can do about it so that you can respond to them in the way that you want to, rather than reacting from frustration and from anger, so that you can maintain that connection with them, and so that you can feel calmer and more in control of yourself, and so that you can maintain your connection with them, and you can also teach them how to be able to regulate their emotions better. For those of you who don't know me, there's a lot of people here today who I haven't met before, so it's really lovely to meet you. It's really lovely to have you here. My name's Navit. I'm a cognitive behaviour therapist, and I've been practicing for about 14 years. And about 3 years ago, I set up Conscious and Calm to share the CBT strategies that I use with my clients with parents, because I realised, having seen my friends having children, having had my own daughter, I realised how useful the CBT strategies that I use with my clients are to help parents deal with all of the challenges that we face as parents, the pressures, the chaos, the uncertainty, the demands, all of those things that are the common difficulties that the parents I work with now face. CBT strategies can really, really help us to manage all of those things. So the kind of agenda for this session today is I'm going to explain to you more about why we can be so reactive, so that you can understand your triggers, understand what's triggering you. I'm going to go through what therefore we can do to work through those triggers. They don't affect us in that same way anymore. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I can support you if you want to have any help with that. And then at the end, we're going to have time for questions and answers, so that you can really take away from today the things that you need to start changing some of these patterns. Can everybody please make sure that your microphone is on mute? And like I said, you're more than welcome to have your videos on so that I can see you. So before we look at the triggers, I just want to explain a little bit about why it's so important that we as parents focus on ourselves and the role we play in our dynamics, rather than focusing on what we can do to change our children's behaviour and make their behaviour more in line with what we expect. I don't think there's anyone who would not agree that some of the things that our children do are really, really frustrating, right? It is really frustrating when we've asked somebody to do something many times and they don't listen to that. It's really difficult to try and get a child out of the door when they're having a tantrum. It can be really hard to navigate, your teenage years, when they find it hard to open up to you and talk to you about the things that that they need to talk about. So a lot of those things can be really difficult. And whilst we could focus, and we can actually focus on the things that we can do to help our children to learn to be able to do things in the way we need to a little bit more, a lot of their behaviors that we find difficult are actually really developmentally normal. So their brains are learning. Their brains are at a stage where they're not able to do things in the way that we want them to do. And if we blame them for that, or shout at them for that, for doing the things that they can't actually help, because that's just where they are at developmentally, it can be quite problematic. It can lead to some really problematic patterns. It can create more stress for them and make them more emotionally dysregulated, so that there is actually less cooperation and there are more struggles. It can also lead to some longer term patterns. So a lot of the clients that I work with, and this is one of the reasons that that I started Conscious and Calm, is that when I'm working with my clients, when we are looking at how some of their unhelpful patterns developed, it's often in childhood. And especially for those clients who have kind of self-critical tendencies or beliefs that they're not good enough in some way, often we can understand that in terms of how they were treated as a young child, how their natural responses were responded to. So when we focus on our bit, rather than on how we can kind of change our children's behavior or get them to do things the way that we want to, it really can create really long-lasting patterns that won't only affect you, they'll affect your children growing up, and they'll also affect future generations. So it's very, very, very hard to do this work. It's really hard if you weren't raised to be emotionally aware and to be able to manage big emotions so that you can respond the way that you want to be. It's very, very hard to break these generational patterns, but it is something that you can do. And this, what today is kind of can really help you to start doing, is to start seeing the power that you have to change your patterns, to change your internal world, and to change the way that things affect you, so that actually you can respond in the way that you want to, and see how that influences everybody else around you, see how that influences your children. So that's what we focus on, or that's why my work is to support parents to focus on themselves and their inner world and their patterns and what they can do to change those patterns for the benefit of their family. So let's get started. So what I've seen from working with lots and lots and lots of parents is that there are 4 main reasons that parents get triggered. I'm going to go through each of those main reasons today. And the good news is that each of these reasons has a solution. So there's always, for all of the reasons that you're getting triggered, there is a solution. There is a way that you can break that pattern so that you can feel calmer, so that your children can also benefit from that, feel calmer, feel more regulated, and therefore more cooperative, which makes life much easier. So the first one is nervous system regulation. So you may or may not have heard of work around nervous system regulation. The nervous system is the system in our body whose role it is to keep us safe and alive. Okay, so it's a series of processes in our bodies that are designed to protect us from threats. This was a very, very, very effective system many years ago, when the threats that we experienced were warring tribes or big beasts, because this system picks up on threats and it primes our body to have the strength to fight that threat or run away from it. It's called the fight or flight system, which you may have heard of. It was a really effective system because it kept us safe and alive through all these years. But today, the stresses that we face, the threats that we face, the pressures that we face are really different to the physical ones that we usually experienced in the past. But the body still responds in exactly the same way. Okay, so today's day-to-day stresses activate the fight or flight system, activate our nervous system in the same way that it did many years ago. Please can you just make sure whoever's on, can everyone just make sure that they're on mute, please, because I can hear someone in the background. So we need to keep that in mind, right? Because we're living in a really fast-paced and often very stressful world, and our nervous system is picking up on that, and we're experiencing the results of that in a very physical way. And what happens is that can build up over time. It can build up throughout your day, so that actually by the end of the day you're feeling super overwhelmed. You're feeling really overwhelmed because your nervous system is overstimulated. You know, if you feel like you've constantly got too much to do, that you're constantly switched on, that you know you're multitasking and you're rushing and feeling completely overwhelmed, and even those small tiny things trigger you, it's all to do with your nervous system. I'm going to show you in a way that I hope makes sense and I hope doesn't end in disaster. So imagine this cup, right? You can think of this as your nervous system, right? And all of the space inside the cup is the capacity that you have to deal with stresses. Okay, so when your cup's empty, you've got loads of capacity to deal with all the stuff that comes up in your day, stuff at work, stuff with your kids, stuff that you have to do yourself. And then the more things happen, the less space you have in your cup, right? So say you had a really broken night's sleep. So anyway, you're starting the day and just have like a little bit less capacity. You can still deal with stuff, but you've got less capacity. And then your kids don't get up, so you're really rushing to get to school, and that puts another pressure on, which your nervous system is experiencing as if it's a threat, right? So this is all impacting on the activity in your nervous system, making you feel more and more stressed. And then you're just leaving the house and an email pops up on your phone of something that you forgot to do, and then that adds to your stress levels. And you can see that as each of these things happens, you have less and less space left in your cup. And then there's traffic on the way to work, and then colleague is difficult, and then your boss is grumpy, and you have to leave work and you haven't got all your work done, and then you get home and the house is a mess, and then your kids get home from school, and you can see you have like literally no space left in your cup, right? And that is why you get so reactive. So there's things that your kids might do that on a normal day wouldn't, or on another day might not bother you, but when your cup is full, when you've got no space left, when your nervous system is completely activated, completely overactivated, there's no space, and you don't have that space, and that's why you get triggered. That's why you explode. That's why you react to your kids in the way you do. It's not to do with them. It's possibly not even to do with that situation. It's to do with everything else that was in your cup. Okay. So what do we do about that? Well, we have to make sure that our cup doesn't get too full. I'm actually just going to take a sip of this so that I can put it down. But look. So we can empty our cup, right? There's lots of ways we can do that. We can lower the pressure we put on ourselves. We can do exercise, we can do yoga, we can talk to a friend, we can have therapy, we can do gardening, we can get another early night, we can make something easy for dinner instead of something difficult, we can leave the housework for one day. So we have the capacity to influence what's going on in our nervous system, right? The choices that we make determine how much space, how much emotional space we have left to deal with our kids. If you recognize this, this is the first type of reason we get triggered. If you recognize it, if you just pop it down in the chat box, and I know this is relevant for you. I had a bowl of water. I had a bowl to catch the water, so I didn't sit there getting myself wet. So you can see that we can influence what is going on with our nervous system, okay? We can influence how much space we've got, how much capacity we have to respond to our children, and therefore we can control, or we can manage or influence how reactive we are. And when we do that, by changing the relationship that you have with your nervous system, so that it's not just something that's in the background making you reactive, but it's an integral part of you and a guide that you use. It's part of what guides you through each day. It guides your decisions about what you need to do and what is best for you. And by doing that, you can make sure that you have enough space in your emotional reserves, enough space in your system, in your physical system, so that when your kids do the things that are inherently frustrating but developmentally normal, you have the capacity to deal with that. So yeah, so I can see, yeah, exactly. So yes, you can resonate with this. Rushing to get out of the house is exactly one of those things, as is multitasking. So it's doing things at that pace your nervous system is recognizing as a threat. So, and then it's responding as if it was a threat that needed to be dealt with by either fighting it or running away. The mental load, exactly. And it's all taking up space in your cup. So everything that we have to take care of, all the things that we have to remember, all the things that we have to deal with, all the things we take responsibility for, it all takes up space in that cup. So if we're thinking about how to become less reactive, one of the things that we need to do is manage what is taking up space in this cup. And yeah, so I also feel more overwhelmed if I have multiple people talking to me at one time. Exactly that. It's all to do with your nervous system and the capacity that your nervous system has, and what it is interpreting as a threat in that moment, and it adds to that. It adds to the kind of activation of that system. In the I run an emotional regulation program, which I'm going to talk to you about later. But part of what we do in those first 4 weeks is learning how to recognize what's going on with your nervous system and how you can dial the activation up and down. It's about giving yourself permission to prioritize that. So a lot of parents feel like they can't prioritize themselves, that, you know, there is a lot to do. There's no denying that. You know, the way that we live right now, life right now, there's a lot to do, but it's about giving yourself permission to have your mental health, your emotional health, your nervous system regulation up there as one of the priorities that you give your time to. And then also developing an awareness of what's going on with your nervous system, so that you know when you need to act to create more space in your emotional cup. And then obviously knowing how you can do that. So what helps you to empty your cup so that you do have more emotional space. So that is the first thing that you need to be thinking about if you want to be less reactive, and you recognize that for you, one of the triggers for you is your nervous system being overactivated. And this one is going to be really important to you, thinking about what you can do to make sure that your cup doesn't get too full continuously every day, so that you can create that level of balance that you need to be able to not become reactive. So the second type of trigger that I'm going to talk about is what we call natural emotions in CBT. So natural emotions are the emotions that we experience in response to a situation that are universally felt by everybody. So they are the kind of inevitable emotional reaction that we have to certain situations. That might be feeling grief when we lose somebody, or feeling disappointed when we miss out on someone. So these are kind of natural emotions, are the standard, universal, normal ways that people respond or people feel in response to certain situations. So, you know, it's natural to feel angry if your 4-year-old kicks out and kicks you in the face. It's natural to feel frustrated if your child isn't going to sleep and you can see the amount of time that you've got to yourself kind of getting shorter and shorter. It's natural to feel apprehensive if your teenager has been excluded by their friends and are really struggling themselves. Even nothing to do, you know, with kids in life, it's natural to feel down if your parent's really ill and you know that you're going to lose them soon, or it's natural to feel anxious if you get served your notice on your property and there's nowhere else to move into. So these emotions, natural emotions, are completely natural responses to situations in life. However, if we don't pay attention to the emotions that we experience in response to all of these situations throughout the day, they take up space in the cup, right? So natural emotions, whether you're aware of them or not, are going to be taking up space in your cup, leaving you with less tolerance to deal with your child's inevitable difficult behaviors. So say you might, make a little note in the chat if this is something that you recognize. So for example, maybe you had an argument with your partner, or your partner was due to do bedtime that night, but they can't for whatever reason. And then you end up snapping at your kids. And it's not because of your kids, it's because of the anger or upset that you had about the situation that happened that causes you to snap at your kids. So these are really important. So we can go through life, we can go through our days, either paying attention to the way that we feel and giving our emotions the airspace that they need, because when we do that, they can pass. Or if we don't feel them, they continue to take up space in the cup, meaning that you're more reactive to your kids, meaning that their behaviors are triggering you when it's more to do with what you're feeling yourself. So when we focus on our feelings, they pass. It's a process called habituation. If you want to know more about it, just pop a little note in the chat, or you can email us. I'll give you the email at the end, and we can send you information on natural emotions and what habituation is. But basically it means that when we allow our feelings, they pass, whatever those feelings are. So even if you're experiencing really, really challenging situations, when you allow yourself to process your emotions, these challenging situations are less overwhelming. And what happens is then when you're less overwhelmed, because you have more space in your cup, you can think more clearly, you can deal with situations better, you can support your children more, and life becomes much easier when we, thank you, I will send you, can you please, I'm going to need your details. Anyone who's asking for notes, make sure you stay on at the end so that I can get your email, so I can send you that. So how do we make sure that we can process the emotions that we have, so that we have more space in our emotional cup, so that we can then stay calm and patient with our children when we want to? There's lots of ways, got it, thank you. There's lots of ways that we can do that. We go through it in the emotional regulation program, we can do it together, but also any process that allows you to sit with your emotions is going to help, whether that's in meditation, whether that's by journaling, whether that's having counseling. Our emotions need to have our attention. They need to be witnessed, and they need to be witnessed in non-judgmentally, and they need to be allowed fully so that we can express them fully, so that they can pass. And that's what happens. So I can see that that's relevant for some of you. If you're watching this on the replay, just if you want any information that we're talking about, just send an email. The email is hello@consciousandcalm.com. For those of you who are writing it into the chat, that's absolutely fine. We're going to make a note of that and get in touch with you. So let's move on to the third reason that you might be getting triggered by your kids. And this is a very common one. So a lot of the parents that I work with, the reason that their kids trigger them so much is because of the beliefs they're having about their children or their behavior. And those beliefs create a lot of big and difficult feelings. So we call these manufactured emotions. So they're different to natural emotions. Natural emotions are the emotions that we inevitably feel in response to a situation. Okay. Manufactured emotions are the emotions that we feel about the thoughts that we have about the situation. Okay, so they're not a direct response to what's happening. They're a direct response to how we're interpreting that situation. And what usually happens in these cases is that our interpretation is unfair, misguided, inaccurate, unrealistic, maybe. And that means that we get left with these really difficult, strong feelings about what our children are doing that aren't really fair. They're not really reasonable, but they're still creating those really strong emotions within us, which again fills up that cup. So an example might be, I say you've got a teenage daughter, you know she's having difficulties at school, but she's not talking to you about them. She's coming back from school every day and going straight to bed, and spending time on her phone. Okay, that naturally is going to bring up some difficult feelings. But on top of that, if you're also having thoughts like, I've passed my issues on to her, this is my fault, I'm a terrible mum, you're going to be experiencing a whole nother level of emotions that are not a result of the situation, but a result of the meaning that you've given to it, how you've personalized it, and develop these really self-critical thoughts as a result. And what happens is that creates very, very painful and distressing feelings that stop us from being able to respond to our children from a place of calm. It stops us from being able to tap into kind of our inner self, our wise self, to be able to respond to the situation and help the situation the way that we want to, because those emotions are so strong, they stop us from being able to do that. Yeah, it creates a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, absolutely. So Another example that you might resonate with is, I resonate with this one a lot. If say your older child, your child, say a 6-year-old, has meltdowns when out in in the supermarket, right? So that can be really difficult naturally, because it makes it harder to do your shopping, and it makes it harder to get home and do all the other things you need to do. So naturally it's going to be difficult in some way. But if you also have thoughts on top of it, like, they shouldn't be doing this, they're too old to be doing this, other kids don't act that way, or even I must be doing something wrong that they're still having these tantrums even though they're 6, that's going to add a whole nother level of emotional difficulty onto it. And that's going to make it way more likely that you're then going to react to them in a way that's not going to be helpful, in a way that's not going to help them to regulate their own emotions, that's not going to help you maintain your connection with them, so that they know that they can trust you, so that they know that you've got their back. Does that make sense? Does this idea of manufactured emotions that create difficult feelings as a result of the thoughts that we're having, does that make sense? Again, if you want to have any more information on this, this is something we work with in CBT all the time. So if you want any information on it, let me know below. Or if you're watching on the replay, email us at hello@consciousandcalm.com, and we will send you information all on manufactured emotions and how we can work with them. And one last example, say you've been working hard all day and you get in, or maybe you were cleaning upstairs and you get downstairs and your living room has been annihilated and it's really messy, and you have these thoughts that I can't deal with this, or this is too hard, life is too stressful. That creates a whole extra level of stress, because no one's saying it's not difficult. That's the natural part of that, is more work is hard. But if you have those beliefs on top of it, that I can't deal with this is too stressful, it makes your emotional experience so much more intense, taking up more space in your cup and making you more reactive, because it's really, really hard not to be reactive when you've got these really strong emotions. Yes, manufactured emotions seem to have more potency than real ones. Yeah, they really can do. They can definitely be more explosive. I think you're right. So worry is a kind of manufactured emotion. Well, that's interesting. So worry, we wouldn't call an emotion. Worrying, we would call a thinking pattern. Worrying is a style of thinking, like, what if this happens, leading to a snowball of thoughts, thinking about all the worst case scenarios. So worrying we'd call you're right, worrying is a type of manufactured thinking process that creates manufactured emotions. Yeah, you're right. Does that make sense? Worrying creates manufactured emotions, and it's a thinking process. Yes, but some people do think worrying is a emotion, which is where it gets tricky, but it's not. So when we've got manufactured emotions, they make situations that can be hard even harder, because the beliefs that we have, if those beliefs are creating really, really strong emotions that aren't natural responses, you can be sure that the beliefs that you have are unfair or unhelpful or unrealistic. And what happens is it creates that kind of strong feeling of pain and distress. It keeps you feeling bad about yourself, creates these really strong emotions that fill your cup, and it makes you really, really reactive. And you're not actually reacting to the situation, you're reacting to your thoughts about it. So you're not reacting to your kid's behavior, you're actually reacting to the meaning that you've given it in your head. So sounds like that kind of resonates with quite a few of you. And what we need to do then, in the case of manufactured emotions, when your beliefs are the problem, when your beliefs or your thoughts of the situation are getting in the way, it's really about learning how to update your beliefs, right? So we all learned our various thinking patterns when we were younger, and we learned them for very, very good reason. They helped us at one time, but they can become quite inflexible and therefore unhelpful in new situations as we get older. So there's a process that we in CBT that we use a lot we call it thought challenging. It's not a great term, but that's what we call it. And it's basically it's a process by which you can learn to develop a more balanced and more realistic and more helpful and more compassionate style of thinking. And what that does is, when you work through so that you're no longer affected by those unhelpful beliefs, it takes away those emotions, so that you're not dealing with those extra emotions. It's not taking up space in your cup, and you can be calmer, you can be more centered, you can be more grounded, because you haven't got those emotions kind of taking up all of your headspace. And by doing that, you know, those kind of, with those examples, rather than thinking my teenager is having a difficult time because of me, you can kind of come to, it's a process that we work through, but to a solution, to a endpoint where you realize that I am a good enough mum, and I'm a good enough mum for these reasons, and this is what I'm going to do for my daughter. And actually it becomes a much more helpful and solution focused response to difficult situations. Or, you know, in the supermarket, when your kid's having a meltdown, rather than be thinking they shouldn't be doing this, there's something wrong with them, or maybe there's something wrong with me, that there's something wrong with them, you can think, actually, this is developmentally normal. It's normal for, you know, until someone's in their 20s, they just don't have the brain capacity to manage emotions in the same way that adults do. Their behavior is normal. What can I, and then it's easier to think, what can I do to support them? You know, if you walk into your messy house, rather than thinking, I can't deal with this is too hard, it's kind of updating those difficult beliefs to thinking, yeah, this is really difficult, but I can cope with it, and I always cope with it, and it will be okay. And you can sense the difference in the way that we feel when we have those original negative beliefs versus the more helpful ones. So anyone, if you want more information on how we can update unhelpful beliefs, send us a message. Let me know here, but make sure that you get your email address. Send a message to hello@consciousandcalm.com, and we can send you information. It immediately, when you learn to challenge your beliefs, it immediately changes your perspective. It immediately changes your outlook, and you can use it for all situations as well, so that you can kind of be that person that responds from a place of calm, and can respond in the way that you want to, because you're not being influenced by these difficult feelings. So the last one now. Yeah, I find that having positive affirmations dotted around the house is helpful. Our attitude counts for so much. Exactly. And by putting those things around the house, what you're doing is you're putting reminders out for you, because we can all think in various ways. And what it is, it's a reminder for you to help you to tap in to your more rational mind. And actually, when we do that, when we tap into that more rational mind, we can think more logically, and then it is much easier to stay focused, to tap into those more helpful beliefs. So I've got that. I got that message. Yes. So the last main reason why the parents that I now work with tend to get triggered by their kids is probably one of the most interesting, but it's certainly one of the most interesting for me. But it's also one of the most powerful ones to work with. And this is what we call trapped emotions. So trapped emotions are emotions that you experienced in the past that you weren't able to process at the time for whatever reason, and they therefore become trapped in the body. It's like an emotional wound. It's like an emotion, imagine an emotional scab, and it sits there in the body. You're not going to be aware of it, but it is taking up a lot of space in your cup. And most of us have many, many trapped emotions, and it takes up space here. So if you do lots of calming activities, but you still feel quite overwhelmed, you still kind of always feel like you're on the edge, it's quite likely that you have some trapped emotions that are just taking up space in your cup. And our trapped emotions will stay trapped until we free them. And what happens is, whilst we might not be aware of them, certain situations will come and pick that emotional scab, and it's like it starts to bleed profusely again, and your reaction can become completely overwhelming. And it's not actually a result of the situation that's happening in today. It's because the emotions that were trapped in the past have come to the fore. If you're experiencing trapped emotions, that response is really visceral. So it's when you feel completely taken over by your emotions. It's like your physical response is so strong. that rationally, you know, this thing shouldn't be bothering you or wouldn't normally bother you, but it really is. But you just can't put your finger on why. And it's likely it's because of trapped emotions. So it's like, say your child was it could be a young child, it could be an old child, it doesn't really matter because it's all about you, not about your child. But say your child was excluded from their friendship group. They were having a really, really hard, so they come back from school and they tell you that the other children wouldn't let them play. You might have a really strong reaction to that. That is more to do with past experiences that you had where you felt excluded or rejected or abandoned, that you haven't yet been able to process, rather than the situation itself. Does that make sense? And does this resonate? So trapped emotions are really, really important ones, because we're often very unaware of them, but they are absolutely dictating our reactions. And when your child, so say your child doesn't listen to you, and or your partner or anybody, but say your child doesn't listen to you, you've asked them many times to do something, they don't listen to you, and you just snap and you feel like it came from nowhere, that that morning you told yourself, I'm going to be calm today, but they did one thing and your emotion just literally came as if from nowhere. It's likely that because it wasn't that they didn't listen, but if you go back, you might realize that there were times in your past where you felt unseen or unheard, and maybe you felt very insecure or powerless or anxious as a result of that. And if you weren't able to deal with those feelings at the time, which many young people aren't able to, it stays there. So that when your child today doesn't listen to you, it's like all of those feelings from the past come to the fore, and you're responding not to the situation that's unfolding in front of you, but to all of those times in the past where you felt those really strong emotions in a similar situation that you weren't able to process at the time. Does that make sense? Or does it? I'm getting some nods. Good. If it doesn't make sense, let me know. And so what these trapped emotions do, they take up space in your cup. They make you way more reactive. They make it much harder to think clearly. Thank you. Makes it much harder to stay patient, makes you feel completely overwhelmed, completely out of control of your emotions. So what is the solution? What do we need to do if it's trapped emotions that's making you reactive? What the solution is freeing them, really. Those emotions are going to stay trapped until they're dealt with. And we do that by revisiting your past memories, allowing those emotions that are connected to those past memories to be processed, to habituate in the same way that natural emotions need to be, and then they pass. And what you find then is that the same things don't even trigger you, because you've healed that emotional wound. So when your child doesn't listen to you today, or when you hear that your child was excluded that day in the playground, it doesn't impact you in the same way. You don't even have the same emotional response to it, which means that you have much more space to be able to think about how you want to respond to them. Does that make sense? It takes a bit of a while for me to see your responses. Yes, good, thank you. So when we process our trapped emotions, we have way more emotional space. It's much easier to roll with the challenges that we experience in life because we have more space to deal with them. So you'll find your kids don't trigger you as much. The other challenges that you have to face in life, they don't trigger you as much in the same way. It's easy to stay calmer. Life feels easier. So you can see that when we're thinking about why your children trigger you and what you can do about it, it is less about them and it is more about you. So there are things that we can do to help our children to feel more regulated. And when we do that, it does mean that a lot of their behavior can be more can be easier for us. But really, to be able to do that, we need to be able to manage what is happening for us in the situation. So, you know, it's all about your nervous system. It's all about your cup. It's all about the different ways that life adds to the contents of it, and the different ways that you have of managing how full your cup is. And that is absolutely something that we have within our control. And therefore, whether we react to our kids or not is absolutely something that we have within our control. There are strategies that we can use in the moment. We have a whole session on that in the emotional regulation program. But actually, if we haven't done any of this other work, then nothing's going to help in the moment. Okay, it's all about making sure that we are doing the things that we need to, so that we don't have to resort to the trying to stay calm in that moment when we've been triggered, which is actually really, really, really hard to do. So yeah, when we take care of our own stuff, when we create more emotional space within ourselves, it's much easier to then also put into place the strategies that will help our children to also learn how to regulate their emotions and how to be easier to be around. Before we move on, are there any questions? Make sure you put your questions in the comments there, and we're going to go through them in the Q&A. And if you're watching it on the replay, you can send your questions to hello@consciousandcalm.com. So if you would like support working through this, helping yourself to do what you need to create more emotional space within you, then that's what we do in the emotional regulation program. It's a 12-week process, and it helps you to learn everything that you need to be able to regulate your emotions, to kind of manage your cup, so that you can respond to your kids in the way that you want to. This is, let's see if I can share this. This is what we cover. And you can see that the first few weeks, don't know if it's clear from that, but the first few weeks we really focus on nervous system regulation, helping you to be able to monitor your nervous system and respond to it in the way that you need to, so that you can create that emotional space in your cup. We look at the next few weeks, it's all about those thinking patterns, so how you can gain control over negative thoughts, and we look at that in particular areas. So, you know, managing self-criticism and blame. It's really helpful for parents who kind of have some of those thoughts about not being good enough, and criticizing themselves and labeling themselves when things don't go well. We have a whole session on overcoming fear and judgment of rejection. So that's a different type of negative thoughts that a lot of people struggle with. We have a session on managing worries. Then we look at dealing with trapped emotions. Then we look about how you can kind of grow your inner world so that you can build on your strengths and also find challenges. It sounds wrong to say it, but find challenges easier to deal with, so that challenges don't floor you and you can grow from challenges rather than seeing them as something really, really stressful that creates a lot of difficulty for you. So if you're interested in that program, if you'd like my support with it, then there's a few cohorts starting. So there's one cohort starting at the end of this month. There's a cohort starting at the end of November, middle of November, sorry, and then the next one will be in February. So if you know that it is the right time for you to be working on yourself, to be giving yourself permission to prioritize yourself in this way and work on the stuff that you know that you need to, for not only for yourself, so that you can feel calmer and less stressed and happier, but also for the sake of your children, then you can type emotional regulation into the comments here, and we will send you the information we can send you information about it. If you're watching this on replay, then just send us an email to hello@consciousandcalm with the title emotion regulation, and we will send you the details. There is an early bird price because we're not advertising this until next week. So if any of you are watching this live or on replay, there's an early bird price for this week. So if you want to have more details, just let us know either in the comments here or on email. And also the first 5 people to book will also receive a kind of personalized meditation package. So part of this process, the emotion regulation program, we have it's a weekly lessons, weekly group calls, and also a private support group. So you'll have daily support if you want to. You don't have to access it every day. But also we have a lot of meditations to help with your nervous system regulation. So the first 5 people who book onto this next cohort will have those meditations personalized to them. So we will find out when we need to be helping you most with to regulate your nervous system and what's going to help that most, and then create the meditations for the program around what you need the most. So if you want any more information, just type it in the chat here or send us an email at hello@consciousandcalm.com. And if this is something you want to do, just get in touch with us. For everybody watching this on replay, we're going to be moving on to the Q&A section now. And I'm going to end the recording now so that everybody here live feels more safe and more comfortable speaking up. So if you have any questions and you weren't able to attend live, just send any questions to hello@consciousandcalm.com and we will try and answer those as best we can. So to you guys, thank you very much for your time and your presence watching this on the replay. If you've got any questions, be in touch. If you want details of the emotional regulation program, be in touch. And depending on when you're watching this, have a wonderful day or have a wonderful evening.